Hey, what's happening, YouTubers? Today I kind of want to do my own personal top 5 favorite Batman figures from the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse line. Now, to say McFarlane Toys has produced a lot of Batman figures in the last 2 years in their Multiverse line is a little bit of an understatement, but I decided to compile my own list. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with some honorable mentions. So starting off the honorable mention list, it would be a disservice if I didn't include this in the honorable mentions, but we have the Todd McFarlane inspired Batman. This one I was really stoked to have in hand. I remember when Todd McFarlane first announced this on his Instagram page, I think it was back in August 2020. I remember being so hyped for it and getting it in hand. I really liked the figure. Not enough to get in the top 5 list, but I thought I'd rather pay respects to the Todd father by at least including it in the honorable mention. This next honorable mention might be a little bit of a controversial one because it isn't exactly a multiverse figure, but it's still a Batman figure nonetheless from McFarlane Toys. It's the recently released Retro 66 Batman, and the reason why I put this on an honorable mention, I think McFarlane Toys did an amazing job with the sculpt, especially the head sculpt of the Batman. The only downside to it is, one, it's not a multiverse figure, so the articulation is a little lacking, and two, that cloth goods cape they used was kind of meh, but I still think it deserves an honorable mention. And the last honorable mention I'll put in here before we start the top 5 list is this Hellbat that I've kit bashed with the DC Collectibles Armored Batman Bruce Wayne head sculpt on there. The reason why I did that is because we haven't gotten an Armored Batman from the Batman Beyond series. Hopefully we will one day. So I kind of kit bashed this to make it that. But the reason why I put this on honorable mention was because this and the Unchained Armor Superman were the first two mega figures that McFarlane Toys produced in their first wave of DC Multiverse figures. And I think it definitely deserves honorable mention because McFarlane Toys put this out on the market at the $20 price point, and he wasn't kidding when he wanted the consumer to get the most bang for their buck, because we sure did get a lot of plastic when it came to those two figures and still continue to do to this day. And kicking our list off at number 5, we have Batman Beyond from the JokerBot Collective Build Wave that came out earlier this year. Now, the reason for this being in my personal top 5 favorite list is really simple. I'm very nostalgic, and I was a huge fan of Batman Beyond animated series growing up. So to have this figure in hand, even though it's not based on the animated series but on the comics, it's still dope to see McFarlane Toys' iteration of Batman Beyond in figure form. And in my opinion, way better than what Mattel had a few years ago. That was the Lobo Wave. That one had pinless joints, but it wasn't even double jointed elbows. So to see a figure of Batman Beyond with double jointed elbows and good range of articulation, and in my opinion better than what Mattel produced, is kind of dope to see. The only downside to this figure is that the cape on the back is not removable, but still a dope figure nonetheless, and enough to get it a spot at number 5. And coming in at number 4, we have Batman from the Snyder Cut Justice League movie. Now, there's a few reasons why this is on the list. One, I didn't think we would ever get Justice League figures from the Snyder Cut movie, yet here we are. We have a Snyder Cut movie on HBO Max, and now we have Snyder Cut figures. So the reason why I had this on my list is because I had the Mattel versions that came out a few years ago, and those were absolute garbage. So when McFarlane came out with their own version of the Snyder Cut Justice League figures, I was so stoked. One of the reasons being is because this tack suit Batman, this was designed for McFarlane to make. The details and the sculpting on this is awesome, and even the likeness on the Batman head sculpt is accurate to what we saw in the movie, and enough to get it a number 4 spot on my list. And coming in at number 3, we have Batman the Grim Knight. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this figure is at the number 3 spot. One is that the figure looks like it was pulled straight from the comic books. Everything about it is so precise and detailed, from the sculpt and the details on the guns and the suit. This thing looks badass. I think McFarlane Toys absolutely knocked it out of the park when it came to this figure. I like that accessory gun pack you can just attach to his back, because aesthetically that makes for great toy photography, and also it just looks badass. It's also basically the Batman meets the Punisher. It's so dope, and a dope looking figure. Probably one of my favorite McFarlane Toys Batman figures they've made yet so far, and enough to get it at the 3 spot. And coming in at number 2, we have Batman from the White Knight series. Now, the reason why I have this high on the list at number 2, much like the Grim Knight, this figure looks like it was pulled straight from the comics, from Sean Gordon Murphy's illustration. This figure looks so badass, and the fact that we never got one from Mattel and we finally got one with McFarlane Toys was awesome to see. I definitely love the sculpting of the cape. The only downside to it is that the cape drapes a little over the shoulders, much like the early McFarlane Toys Batman figures, so it hinders his articulation a little bit, but not too much. But it's dope figure in my opinion, enough to get it a number 2 spot. And coming in at number 1, we have the Batman Who Laughs. This may be a controversial one, but this is still technically Batman because, I mean, it's Bruce Wayne from Earth 22. But anyways, this was one of the first McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse figures I picked up and was like, yeah, this thing is pretty badass. Don't get me wrong, that first wave of figures McFarlane Toys came out with that I picked up, there was a lot of hits and misses. This one was definitely a hit. It was from the first and only collector-build Batmobile wave that included Batgirl and Nightwing, but of the three, this one was the most sought after at the time, and it's still, to me, one of their best figures they've produced to this date. And the reason why I have it so high on the list at number one, to me, is because when I first got the figure, I was like, yeah, they're pretty serious about making dope figures for collectors, especially at the $20 to $25 price point. This figure was so badass, and I think it still is, especially when it comes to detail and sculpt, and the way it looks like it's just pulled straight from the comic books. I think McFarlane Toys kicked ass when it came to this figure. So that is my top 5 favorite McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman figures so far, YouTubers. Let me know in the comments below what you think of my top 5 list, and let me know your top 5 McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Batman figures too. I mean, McFarlane Toys has produced a ton of Batman figures, which I'm not complaining, but he has produced a ton of Batman figures. Let me know your favorites, because I know there's still more coming out this year that are probably going to break into this top 5 and maybe move a few pieces out. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you all think. And like always, if you like what you see, hit that like button. If you haven't already yet subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching.